In the kitchen where the morning sunlight streamed in, Erin Watson carefully poured coffee while mentally organizing the day's agenda. She had an important presentation at the architecture firm, followed by her son Oliver's art exhibition, and then the monthly barbecue at her parents' house that evening. She let out a deep sigh. "Mom's going to be bursting with pride over Lisa's daughter again," she murmured. Her husband, Michael, came down the stairs and put a hand on her shoulder. "Good morning. Lost in your thoughts again." "Sorry," Erin smiled. "It's not work. I was thinking about tonight's barbecue." Michael Watson was successful as an IT consultant, but his greatest strength was his gentle nature and his ability to understand everything deeply. He set his mug down next to the to-do list and poured himself some coffee. "Barbara and Frank are worried about Oliver's well-being, aren't they?" Erin Watson had triumphed in her career as an architect. Her designs had changed the Chicago skyline. But her relationship with her parents was complicated. She gathered her long blonde hair as she took a sip of coffee. "My parents have always treated Lisa's family like they're the favorites. At first I didn't care. I made my own way and I'm independent. But now I realize Oliver resents it." Before she could continue, 10-year-old Oliver Watson ran down the stairs. The delicate-featured, bright-eyed boy carried his backpack in one hand and in the other, his latest masterpiece, a stunning watercolor landscape. "Mom, I'm taking this to the art exhibition today," he said excitedly. Erin felt proud of her son's talent and took the painting. "It's wonderful, Oliver. I hope Grandma and Grandpa see it today, too." Oliver's expression dimmed slightly. "Grandma didn't even look at my paintings last time. She spent the whole time watching Amy's gymnastics video." Erin and Michael exchanged glances. Barbara Morrison, a 64-year-old former high school teacher, was known for her strict and controlling nature. Her husband, Frank Morrison, a 66-year-old veteran, rarely contradicted her. This time was different. Erin tried to reassure him, though in reality she was also trying to convince herself. After breakfast, Erin took Oliver to school and then went to work. That afternoon she successfully delivered her presentation, receiving enthusiastic applause from the client, but her mind was already on the family gathering that night. After picking Oliver up from school, they went to the art exhibition together. His paintings received much praise, and the art teacher raved about his talent. Erin felt proud, but couldn't help wishing her parents felt the same pride in him. "I'm going to show my painting to Grandma and Grandpa at the barbecue?" Oliver asked. Erin stroked his hair tenderly. "Of course. But remember, Oliver, sometimes people only see what they want to see. That doesn't mean your talent or your worth is any less." As she prepared for the barbecue, Erin thought about previous gatherings. They were always at Barbara and Frank's house, and Lisa's family usually got all the attention. Lisa Clayton, her 32-year-old sister, was a housewife and depended emotionally and financially on their parents. Her husband, Jason Clayton, a real estate agent, did everything he could to get in good with his in-laws. Amy, their 8-year-old daughter, was the grandparents' darling, who gave her everything she asked for. Erin had endured this unfair treatment for years. But lately, she couldn't ignore that Oliver was being sidelined by his grandparents. "I need to talk to you before the barbecue," Michael said that night as they were getting ready. His expression was serious. "What's wrong?" Erin asked, stopping her salad preparations. "Your mom called me yesterday to ask about Amy's birthday present. They're planning a family trip to Disneyland." Erin stopped what she was doing. "And what did they give Oliver for his birthday?" "A basketball and a $10 bill." Michael nodded. "I don't think we should let this continue. We have to do something to change it." Erin took a deep breath. "I never wanted to ruin my relationship with my parents, but I can't stand to see Oliver feeling unloved by his grandparents." In the car on the way to the barbecue that night, Erin turned to her son. "Stay calm today no matter how they treat you. Sometimes you learn more just by observing in silence." Oliver frowned slightly, confused, but nodded. "Okay, Mom." Erin was surprised by her own determination. Tonight wasn't just about observing. It was about defending her son. She took Michael's hand and nodded silently. She knew he felt the same. When Erin's car pulled up in front of her parents' house, she felt a slight knot in her chest. The huge 2-story White House always evoked mixed emotions in her. It was a place where childhood memories mingled with adult frustrations. Here we are, she said, addressing Oliver in the back seat. Michael squeezed her hand and gave her a slight smile. Ready? Yes, I'm ready, Erin replied with a firm expression. She took the bowl of homemade quinoa salad from the passenger seat, while Michael carried a small box of desserts. Oliver carefully held his painting from the art exhibition. The three of them walked up the gravel path toward the impeccably landscaped garden. Under the blue sky of that Sunday in May, the deep green grass shimmered in the sun. At the back of the garden, a huge oak tree cast a shadow over the picnic table where Lisa's family was already settled. Barbara Morrison had her granddaughter, Amy, on her lap and was tenderly adjusting a golden curl. Here you go, Amy. I brought your favorite ribbon, she said, tying a bright pink bow in her hair. She looked up and her tone changed when she noticed Erin. Oh, Erin. You're here. Frank Morrison, standing proudly by the grill in a white apron, was talking to Jason Clayton while preparing the meat. When he saw Erin and her family, he waved. Hi, you finally arrived. I just lit the fire. Erin smiled as she entered the garden. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. She placed the salad on the table. Barbara glanced at it and pursed her lips. Oh, salad again? Couldn't you bring something more elaborate? Erin took a deep breath, controlling her annoyance. Mom, it's a special clove and vegetable salad. I used organic ingredients. My colleagues loved it. Barbara waved her hand dismissively. Yes, fine, she replied, immediately turning her attention back to Amy. Now, Amy, Grandma bakes special cookies for you. They're chocolate chip with peanut butter, your favorites. Amy clapped enthusiastically. Yay! Thanks, Grandma. Oliver remained silent, holding his painting. Erin placed a hand on his shoulder and said calmly, Mom, Oliver won an award at his school's art exhibition. He brought his work to show you. Barbara glanced briefly at Oliver but quickly looked away. Oh, how nice, she said without enthusiasm. Amy also danced in her kindergarten recital last week. She has impressive talent. Erin felt Oliver's shoulders slump slightly. She squeezed his hand and whispered in his ear. It's a wonderful painting. Meanwhile, Jason and Frank were still at the grill, passionately discussing how to cook the meat. Lisa, sitting at the picnic table, was taking pictures of Amy with her cell phone. Michael, how about a beer? Frank shouted. Thanks, I'll take one, Michael replied with a forced smile. Erin steered Oliver toward the lawn. Why don't you try playing with Amy? Oliver hesitated but gathered his courage and approached his cousin. Amy, do you want to play ball? Amy frowned and crossed her arms. I don't want to play with Oliver, she protested. I'm going to eat cookies with Grandma. Barbara immediately embraced her protectively. Erin, don't force her. Amy is having a special moment with her grandma. Erin gritted her teeth. Mom, Oliver was just asking her. Barbara snorted disdainfully. Your son should learn to be more sociable. Amy is the most popular girl in her class. Michael, who had been watching the scene in silence, touched Erin's arm, a gesture asking her to calm down. Erin took a deep breath and went to the table. Frank had already started grilling the meat. Pointing to a large cut, he said proudly, Lisa, Jason, Amy, I saved you the prime rib. It's the best. I bought it at a specialty store. Lisa smiled enthusiastically. Thanks, Dad. Amy loves meat. Erin frowned. Dad, and what did you buy for Oliver? Frank hesitated for a moment. Oh, of course, I bought him a steak too, he replied, but avoided looking him in the eye and quickly changed the subject, starting to talk about Jason's real estate business. Time passed, and the preparations for the meal were completed. Barbara spread a decorated tablecloth over the picnic table and arranged elegant paper plates along with cutlery. Erin took out the salad while Michael put the desserts in the refrigerator. Come on, everyone. The meat is ready, Frank shouted. Everyone gathered around the table. With pride, Frank placed a juicy, perfectly cooked prime rib in front of Amy. Lisa and Jason also received thick, pink, and tender portions. But when Frank put Oliver's plate on the table, Erin froze. The piece of meat in front of her son was completely burnt, the edges charred and the center dry and overcooked. Dad, what is this? Erin asked incredulously. Barbara let out a light laugh. It's a little more cooked, but it's fine. He's a boy. A little toughness is good for him. Frank chuckled. Even a dog would hesitate to eat that. Lisa and Jason also started to laugh. Oliver, you must like the burnt part, right? Kids love it, Lisa said lightly. Oliver remained silent, looking at the meat. His blue eyes began to fill with tears. He tried to contain them, but his lips trembled. Erin felt something inside her break. She slowly stood up and said in a firm voice, "This is unacceptable." The garden fell silent. "What are you talking about?" Barbara asked, frowning. Erin pointed to her son's plate. "Oliver doesn't have to eat that." "But what a waste!" Barbara exclaimed. "In my day we ate with gratitude, even if it was a little burnt. It's still food. Everyone else's meat is perfectly cooked," Erin replied, her voice controlled but firm. "Why is Oliver the only one who received this?" Frank shrugged. "That's how it came out. It wasn't on purpose. I'll be more careful next time." Erin looked at Oliver. His tears were already falling freely. Something in her hardened. She slowly stood up, took her son's plate, and without saying a word, threw it in the nearest trash can. "Michael, Oliver, we're leaving." "Wait, you can't take a joke," Frank protested. "It's just a barbecue. Don't make a drama out of this." Erin turned to him, her voice low but firm. "This isn't a joke. It's mistreatment." The silence at the table became unbearable. "You may not realize it, but you've always treated Amy as special while leaving Oliver in the background. You don't show interest in his art, you don't celebrate his achievements, and today you gave him burnt meat and made fun of him. But today is the last day I allow that." Barbara's face turned red. "You always exaggerate. You're too sensitive." Erin held her gaze. "This is not an exaggeration. If anything, my reaction is too late." She took Oliver's hand. Michael also stood up and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "For years, I pretended not to see how they treated him, but enough is enough." Lisa's jaw dropped. Jason avoided eye contact, uncomfortable. Amy, oblivious to everything, continued to eat her rib happily. Without saying anything else, Erin's family left the garden and headed for the car. No one tried to stop them. Inside the car, Oliver spoke softly. "Did I do something wrong, Mom? Was it Grandpa and Grandma's fault?" Erin, still with her heart pounding, turned and hugged him firmly. "Absolutely not. This is their problem, not yours. You did nothing wrong. You're a wonderful boy." Michael started the car and, looking at Erin and Oliver in the rearview mirror, said softly, "It's okay, champ. Sometimes even adults make mistakes, but don't worry, Mom will take care of this." Erin tenderly wiped Oliver's tears. "Don't worry. I'm going to fix it. I promise." As the car drove away, Erin looked at her parents' house through the window. Something in her had changed. A new determination was growing inside her. The car moved silently along the night road. Oliver, exhausted, fell asleep in the back seat. Michael, concentrating on the road, glanced at his wife through the rearview mirror. Erin clenched her hands on her knees, her expression hard. No one spoke, but the car was charged with emotions. When they got home, Michael gently carried Oliver and took him to his room. Erin stayed in the kitchen, mechanically preparing a cup of tea. Her mind kept replaying every detail of the barbecue. Michael came down the stairs and entered the kitchen. Erin was leaning on the counter, lost in her thoughts. Erin let out a deep sigh. "How's Oliver?" she asked without turning around. "He's sound asleep," Michael replied, approaching and putting a hand on her shoulder. "He was very tired today." Erin finally turned and looked Michael in the eye. Her eyes were wet with anger and sadness. "And you?" she asked softly with a slight tremor. They sat on the living room sofa, holding cups of hot chamomile tea. After a long silence, Erin finally spoke. "This crossed the line." Her voice trembled with rage. "For years I've tolerated my parents' behavior, their favoritism for Lisa, their refusal to acknowledge my achievements. But today," she hesitated, staring at her cup. "I couldn't bear to see Oliver hurt," Michael said softly. "When I saw the tears in his eyes, I felt something break inside me too." Erin took a sip of tea and set her cup down on the table. He couldn't stand feeling unloved by his own grandparents. This isn't just favoritism. It's abuse. Michael nodded. Today it became clear that it's not just a generational difference or a lack of understanding. They're hurting him intentionally. We have to do something. But what? Aaron asked. Michael exhaled slowly. Should we cut off contact with them completely? Aaron was silent for a moment, then looked up with a determined expression. No, we're not going to make him feel the same way. I have a plan. Michael noticed the change in his wife's expression. What kind of plan? First, we're going to invite them to dinner at our house. A reconciliation dinner, Aaron began to explain. And we're going to serve them a special meal. Exactly the same treatment they gave Oliver. Michael raised an eyebrow. And that's all. No, Aaron continued, a spark of determination in her eyes. Then we'll organize a family vacation. But without them. Michael stared at her in surprise. Are you serious? Completely serious. Her voice was calm but her gaze burned. It's time to level the playing field. They need to learn a lesson. That night they worked out the details of the plan. Michael understood Aaron's anger and promised his support. He too had suffered his in-laws' indifference for years. The next morning, Aaron got up early and put her plan into action. After Oliver went to school and Michael to work, she began making calls. The first was to her friend, Chef Carlos Sanchez of the exclusive restaurant Lucille. Carlos owed her a favor, as Aaron had designed the new branch of his restaurant. Carlos, it's been a while. It's Aaron Watson, she greeted on the phone. I'm organizing a special dinner, but I have a slightly unusual request. She explained the situation and her plan. I need 2 different dishes. One with the best ingredients, a perfect meal. And the other. She paused, choosing her words. I want it to look the same but be inferior in taste and quality. Especially the meat. I want it slightly burnt. Carlos was silent for a moment, surprised. But when he heard Aaron's story, he understood the message and agreed to help. I understand, Aaron. I'll create a special menu exactly as you need it. Then Aaron called Michael to make sure he was also making progress with the plan. Michael had already contacted a luxury travel agency and booked a family trip to a private resort in the Caribbean. The reservation is confirmed, he reported by phone. The first week of next month, 7 nights, 8 days. I got a huge villa for the whole family. Except your parents. Aaron smiled with satisfaction. Perfect. Now I'll take care of inviting the others. In the afternoon, Aaron sent electronic invitations to all her relatives except her parents and Lisa's family. Her uncles, aunts, cousins, and Michael's family all received an invitation to a special family reunion in the Caribbean. She attached photos of the luxurious resort and a note. Please keep this a secret from Barbara and Frank. There's a surprise element. The replies began arriving immediately, with many relatives enthusiastically confirming. A message from her Aunt Karen took her by surprise. I won't tell Barbara. We've been worried for some time about how she treats Oliver. By the time Michael returned from work and Oliver from school, Aaron was still in her studio finalizing details. Oliver entered the room and looked over his mother's shoulder. Mom, what are you doing? He asked curiously. Aaron closed the screen and turned to him with a smile. Just planning a few things. She ruffled his hair affectionately. Sometimes, Oliver, people have to learn the consequences of their actions. Oliver looked at her carefully, trying to understand. Is it about Grandma and Grandpa? Aaron was surprised by her son's insight. Yes, but don't worry. Mom will take care of making everything better. She gave him a reassuring smile. How's your homework coming along? I need help. 2 weeks later, everything was ready. Aaron took a deep breath and called her mother. When Barbara's voice came through on the other end of the line, she tried to stay calm. Hi, Mom, she said softly. I have a proposition for you. After what happened at the barbecue the other day, I'd like to organize a special dinner to make amends. It will also be a good opportunity for you to see our new house. There was a brief silence before Barbara replied with some hesitation in her tone. Well, that sounds good. But you were very angry. Yes, I was, Aaron admitted. But thinking of Oliver, I believe family ties are important. He needs a good relationship with his grandparents. Barbara took a moment to respond but finally agreed. Of course, we should get along as a family. I'll tell Frank. Aaron continued the conversation as planned. Lisa's family has other commitments, so they won't be able to come. It will be a special night, just us. It's a shame Lisa and Amy can't be there. Barbara said, and a note of disappointment could be heard in her voice. Aaron smiled calmly. That will give you and Oliver more time to bond. He wants to spend more time with you. After hanging up, she informed Michael. They're coming next Friday at 7. Michael hugged her shoulders. Are you ready? You don't regret it. Aaron shook her head. I don't regret it. This isn't revenge, it's a lesson. They need to learn the weight of their actions. On the day of the dinner, Aaron and Michael's house was immaculate. Beautiful flowers decorated the dining room table, and a soft jazz melody floated in the air. Carlos and his assistant had entered through the back door, and were putting the finishing touches on the food in the kitchen. Aaron placed an expensive bottle of wine on the table and said to Michael, Carlos followed my instructions to the letter. The main courses look identical, but... She smiled slightly. Michael took her hand. Are you really going to do this? Of course, Aaron said with determination. Tonight they will learn a lesson. And tomorrow the real consequences will begin. She looked at the places at the table. At first glance, everything looked like an elegant dinner setting for all the guests, but only her parents would receive special hospitality. At 7 o'clock sharp, Aaron looked out the large living room window. She wore an elegant dark blue dress and had her hair perfectly styled. The garden lights cast a soft glow on the entrance, highlighting the darkness of the night. Michael came down the stairs and stood beside her, looking impeccable in a navy blue suit. Nervous? He asked softly. Aaron shook her head slightly. Not nervous. I just want to be sure we're doing the right thing. Michael put a hand on her shoulder. What you decided is the right thing. They need to understand the consequences of their actions. In the kitchen, Oliver watched curiously as Carlos's assistants worked. He wore a shirt and elegant trousers, looking a bit more mature than usual. Chef, everything's ready, Carlos said as he left the kitchen, dressed in his white chef's jacket and with a completely professional air. I prepared the food exactly as you requested. Aaron smiled gratefully. Thank you, Carlos. I really appreciate your help. The doorbell rang, and everyone in the house fell silent for a moment. Aaron took a deep breath and walked to the entrance. Opening the door, she saw Barbara and Frank Morrison standing there. Barbara wore a beige dress with a pearl necklace, while Frank wore a gray suit. Both looked a little tense. Good evening, Aaron said calmly. Welcome. Good evening, Aaron, Barbara replied with a slight smile. We brought this. She offered a bottle of wine. Aaron accepted it and invited them in. Thank you. Please come into the living room. Barbara and Frank entered the spacious living room and looked around in admiration. The high ceilings, the large windows with a breathtaking view, the modern and elegant furniture. Everything reflected success and good taste. Abstract works of art hung on the walls. What a beautiful house! Barbara exclaimed in surprise. You two have really prospered. Aaron smiled. Yes, it's been the result of a lot of hard work. My architecture business is doing very well, and Michael's IT consultancy continues to expand. Frank looked out the window and nodded approvingly. Wow, what a view. I'm sure this house is also a great real estate investment. Michael approached to greet them politely. He extended his hand and said, Welcome. Oliver appeared behind the adults and shyly greeted his grandparents with a small gesture. Hi, Oliver, Barbara said, somewhat uncomfortably. How are you? Oliver looked at his mom before answering softly. Fine, thanks. Aaron clapped lightly. Well, let's go to the dining room. She led the group to the beautifully decorated table with silverware and gleaming crystal glasses. An elegant chandelier hung from the ceiling, illuminating the room with a warm light, while a soft melody of classical music played in the background. Please sit here, Aaron indicated. Barbara and Frank sat at one end of the table. Aaron sat next to Oliver while Michael sat opposite her. Aaron poured the wine and proposed a toast. To family ties, she said softly. The glasses clinked softly, and everyone took a sip. The atmosphere felt tense, almost uncomfortable. How are Lisa and Amy? Aaron asked to break the silence. Barbara's expression immediately brightened. Oh, they're very well. Amy just started her ballet classes. Seems she has talent. Her teacher has praised her a lot. Aaron smiled. That's wonderful. She placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder. Oliver also won first place in his school's art competition last week. Barbara and Frank looked slightly surprised. "Oh well, congratulations," Frank said, although his tone lacked enthusiasm. At that moment, Carlos and his assistants entered with the appetizers. Beautifully presented plates were placed in front of Michael, Aaron, and Oliver. Smoked salmon carpaccio with arugula salad, with vibrant colors that made them look like small works of art. However, in front of Barbara and Frank, they placed plates with cold canned soup, a brown liquid with a thin layer of oil floating on the surface. Barbara frowned and looked at her plate, comparing it to the others. "What is this?" she asked, visibly confused. Aaron replied casually, "Oh, canned soup. I bought it on sale at the supermarket. It might be a little old, but it's still edible." Frank frowned. "And what are the others eating?" He pointed to Michael's plate. "Special appetizers," Aaron replied. "Carlos prepared them exclusively for us. But don't worry, the main course will be here soon." Barbara had a puzzled expression, but still took her spoon and tasted the soup. She grimaced immediately. "This has almost no flavor, and it's cold." Aaron shrugged. "Well, I don't know, but it's edible, isn't it?" Oliver calmly ate his appetizer while carefully observing his grandmother's reaction. Michael took a sip of wine and exchanged a glance with Aaron. After the uncomfortable moment with the appetizers, Carlos returned with the main course. In front of Michael, Aaron, and Oliver, he placed perfectly cooked steaks, tender and juicy, bathed in a fragrant sauce and accompanied by colorful vegetable garnishes. But in front of Barbara and Frank, the plates were very different. Pieces of blackened meat with charred edges and visibly hard and shrunken texture. Barbara paled and poked the meat with her fork. The piece was as hard as a rock. "This isn't edible," she said with obvious annoyance. "What does this mean?" Aaron replied calmly. "It's a little overcooked, but it's fine." "I wouldn't say so. Even a dog would hesitate to eat it." She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. Frank looked at the meat and suddenly fixed his gaze on Aaron. His face hardened. "This is intentional, isn't it?" His voice was low, containing his anger. "Yes, Dad," Aaron replied without hesitation. "It's exactly the same treatment you gave Oliver 2 weeks ago. You served him burnt meat and laughed at him." Frank remained silent. Aaron continued. "How does it feel? Humiliating? Painful? Do you feel insignificant?" Barbara looked at her, her mouth open. "Aaron, that was just a joke, a simple joke." Aaron's voice rose slightly. "A joke? Serving burnt meat to a 10-year-old boy and making everyone laugh at him is a joke." Frank sank into his chair. "We didn't mean it that way. You've always treated Oliver as if he were less," Aaron continued without hesitation. "When it comes to Amy, you give her the best, you bake her special cookies, you shower her with praise. But with Oliver, you refuse to acknowledge his talent, his sensitivity, his good heart, anything about him." Barbara started to cry. "This is very cruel of you, Aaron. You're punishing us by making us feel this way." Aaron stood up and took an envelope from the side table. She handed it to her father. "These are tickets for a family trip that starts tomorrow. Caribbean Blue Resort in the Caribbean. Oliver, Michael, and I will go. We also invited Lisa and her family, but not you." Frank opened the envelope and looked at its contents. His expression changed as he understood. "You're excluding us from a family trip?" "Yes," Aaron affirmed firmly. "Just as you've done with Oliver for years. You've excluded him from family gatherings, you've left him out of special moments, you've made him feel worthless. Until you understand what you've done, you won't be part of our lives. Grandparents should love all their grandchildren equally. If they don't, they lose their privileges as grandparents." Barbara covered her face with her hands, trembling. "You want to humiliate us?" Aaron's voice softened slightly. "No, I want you to understand how Oliver has felt. What you have done to him hurts. Every time you belittle him, every time you see Amy receive special treatment while he is ignored." Silence hung heavy in the room. Frank rested his elbows on the table and held his head in his hands. Then a soft voice broke the tension. "I like to draw," Oliver spoke softly. "I'd like Grandpa and Grandma to see my drawings." Those words made Barbara's eyes fill with fresh tears. She looked at Oliver as if really seeing him for the first time. "Oliver, I..." Aaron put a hand on her son's shoulder. This isn't a punishment. It's a lesson, an opportunity for you to change. If you truly love Oliver, think about what you must do. Michael stood up and said calmly, Carlos, please serve a real dinner for everyone. Let's eat together as a family for a new beginning. Carlos returned with new plates from the kitchen. This time, the same delicious food was served to everyone. But the atmosphere at the table had changed. Barbara and Frank ate in silence, occasionally glancing at Oliver. New emotions, shame and regret, floated in their eyes. Aaron took a sip of wine and looked out the window at the starry night. Justice was finally being served. Tomorrow they would leave for the Caribbean, leaving her parents behind, and during that time they would have much to think about. Aaron smiled as she watched Oliver enjoy his meal. Later, a photo appeared on social media. Aaron, Michael, Oliver, and the rest of the family smiling in front of the turquoise blue sea of the Caribbean and its white sand beaches. Hashtag best family vacation, hashtag loving family, hashtag Caribbean memories. A month had passed since the trip, but every time Aaron looked at that photo, the warm memories returned. She put down her cell phone and went to the window, looking out at the garden. The trip to the Caribbean had been a wonderful experience. Oliver had built sandcastles with his cousins, enjoyed snorkeling, and experienced one adventure after another. Even Aaron's uncles and aunts seemed more relaxed without the presence of Barbara and Frank. Mom! Oliver burst into the room with a big smile, holding a new painting. It was a vibrant watercolor of the tropical fish they had seen on the trip. I'm going to present it at the school exhibition. Aaron took her son's work and smiled. It's incredible, Oliver. You really have talent. Michael appeared from the kitchen and put a hand on her shoulder. It's a masterpiece. We have to frame it and display it. At that moment the doorbell rang. Aaron frowned. She wasn't expecting visitors. Michael went to the door and looked through the peephole. His expression changed. It's Barbara and Frank, Michael said softly. Aaron. Aaron tensed. Since the trip to the Caribbean, Barbara had called several times, but she had ignored all her calls. She felt she wasn't ready to talk to her parents yet, and her anger hadn't completely subsided. Should I open it? Michael asked. Aaron took a deep breath and nodded. Open it. She turned to Oliver and said softly, Could you play in your room for a while? We need to have an adult conversation. Oliver hesitated for a moment, but nodded and went upstairs. Michael opened the door. Barbara and Frank were at the entrance. Both looked tired, older than usual. Frank held a brown envelope in his hand. Barbara's eyes were red, as if she had been crying. Can we come in? Frank asked softly. Aaron hesitated for a moment but finally nodded. Come in. The two entered the living room. Barbara didn't try to sit on the sofa but stood in the center of the room, staring at Aaron. What do you want? Aaron asked coldly, her voice still tinged with anger. Barbara seemed on the verge of tears. We understand what you meant to say, Aaron. Her voice trembled. We were wrong, horribly wrong. Frank stood beside his wife and put a hand on her shoulder. We've had time to think about a lot of things, he said seriously. And the truth is, what you did was justified. We deserved it. Aaron crossed her arms and looked at him expressionlessly. Yes, you deserved it. Frank swallowed and opened the envelope with trembling hands. He took out a letter and began to read aloud. Dear Aaron, Michael, and especially Oliver, we acknowledge that for years we have treated you unfairly. Without realizing it, we have favored Lisa's family and hurt Oliver. We feel ashamed. We only gave special attention to Amy, without stopping to see Oliver's talents and individuality. It wasn't until we experienced firsthand what you put us through that we understood how painful our actions were. When we learned about the family vacation without Lisa, Jason, and Amy, we felt the weight of exclusion for the first time. Barbara took over, her voice choked with emotion. I saw your photos on social media every day. Everyone looked so happy. And then I understood. That's how Oliver has always felt. Frank took a deep breath and continued reading. We promise to change. If you give us the opportunity, we want to repair our relationship with Oliver and be the grandparents he deserves. We have also started family therapy. Please allow us to start over. When he finished reading, the room fell completely silent. Aaron's hard expression softened slightly. Barbara looked at Aaron with pleading eyes. We want to apologize to Oliver too in person. Erin thought for a moment, then exchanged glances with Michael, who nodded slightly. Oliver, Erin called toward the stairs. Can you come down for a moment? Oliver came down carefully, looking a little nervous when he saw his grandparents. Barbara knelt in front of him at his height. She had tears in her eyes. Oliver, your grandfather and I did something very wrong. We didn't treat you as you deserve, and we didn't recognize how incredible you are. She took his small hands in hers. You're a wonderful boy and we love you. Will you forgive us? Oliver frowned thoughtfully, then asked seriously, will you give me steak instead of burnt meat? The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The tension dissolved immediately. Frank couldn't help but laugh through his tears. In a more relaxed voice he replied, I promise you, champ. I'll cook you the best steak in the world. In fact, if you want, I'll even teach you how to cook it. And show me more of your paintings, Barbara added with a smile. I want to display them in Grandma's living room. Oliver, a little embarrassed, nodded slowly. Okay. Erin felt a warmth in her chest as she watched the scene. She looked at Barbara and Frank and smiled. Rebuilding our relationship will take time, but we can move forward, step by step. Several months later, the Morrison family had changed significantly. Barbara and Frank attended family therapy every week and began to understand their own behavior patterns and how they had formed over the years. Barbara, in particular, made a genuine effort to change. Over time, she acknowledged that her controlling attitude had been influenced by her own mother. Lisa, on the other hand, was initially furious with Erin. How could you humiliate our parents like that? She protested. However, seeing the change in them, she too began to reflect on her dependent relationship with them. I think I've been spoiling Amy too much, she confessed to Erin one day. You were right. When autumn arrived, the whole Morrison family gathered at Frank and Barbara's house. But this time the atmosphere was different. The tension from before had disappeared. The table was filled with laughter and good food. Barbara baked special cookies for everyone equally, and they proudly displayed both children's achievements, Oliver's paintings and photos of Amy's dance recital. Frank, for his part, had taken up woodworking as a hobby after his retirement and was teaching Oliver the basics. Together they built a small birdhouse and placed it in the garden. Little by little, the bond between grandfather and grandson strengthened. Every Sunday, Barbara baked special cookies for Oliver and praised his artistic talent. You're going to be a great artist someday, she would say proudly as she placed his latest drawing on the refrigerator. Seeing the changes in her family, Erin knew her actions had been worth it. Sometimes tough love is necessary. She stood by the window, smiling as she watched Frank and Oliver playing in the garden. The wounds had healed, and the family ties were stronger than ever.